Hi, everyone. Jonathan Brandt, GoOutLiving. Today's special guest is Tierra Duncan, author of Birth Control Illusions, a health educator, a longtime coach, kind of done it all. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. So we were going to get into the book a little bit. Why don't you go ahead and introduce the book and tell us what it's about?
Yeah, sure. So the book, The Birth Control Illusion, it's all about the education that a lot of women didn't have or don't have when it comes to hormonal health, what birth control does and doesn't, and then kind of how lifestyle factors fit into that: sleep, stress management, nutrition, and movement. And yeah, and it's the education I wish I had when I was 17 before I started birth control. Um, and it's really there just to kind of empower women so that they feel like they can make an informed decision about their health care. And it's not about judgment. You read everything, you assess, and you decide, hey, I still want to go on birth control for these reasons. And I'm talking about hormonal birth control. Then that's great. Whatever works best for your lifestyle, but there might be things in there that you hadn't considered before, um, that may make you reassess or look at alternative options.
A lot of what we can probably say mainstream medicine almost, whether it's a prescription drug or supplement or whatever. We don't a lot of times look at the side effects, do we? We just because it's so mainstream, we just jump straight into it going, this is just a natural way that we're doing it in our community. Um, and they don't look at all the side effects.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors in that, right? There's marketing, pharmaceutical marketing, the joke about the ad that's like, this will fix this problem, but then you'll get 10 other problems, and the people are like in the park smiling and laughing while they're like listing off all these terrible side effects. But I think with birth control specifically, it is good at preventing pregnancy, right? So that it is effective in what the original application was meant for. But over time, it's become a symptom management tool. So these are things that birth control was not originally created for: acne, painful periods, heavy periods. So, when we think about what a medication is created for, what the side effects are, also off-label uses of that medication. And so if I'm getting on it for acne, are there other things I can do that maybe don't have as significant of a trade-off, right? There are other things to consider. But certainly to your point, yes, we don't always know or understand the full kind of ramifications of side effects.
Well, and I think you brought up a good point is the learning part of it. I think we're starting to get there, but like even back in my day, I'm 50 years old. There wasn't a whole lot of learning even the health and nutrition side of it. So when you get into the prescription drug, it was just, okay, here you go, take it and move on. So the learning is really becoming the best way to figure it out, isn't it?
Yeah, I think social media, right? There are positives and negatives, right, to social media. But I think one of the positives is that, people like yourself and myself, it allows us to kind of go out and share our experiences, share our knowledge. And now you have men and women talking about things that previously were taboo or whispered about. And I think that that's been huge in kind of pushing that education forward. And granted, there are also things that are happening where people are kind of being grifters, selling things. You're feeling vulnerable. You don't understand which direction to go. Hey, take my 5 supplements. So again, good and bad. But I think that's kind of the amazing thing. And also, we have the internet. I'm 40, so I didn't have a computer in the house until I was in my teens. But man, the ability to research, especially now with AI, like research capability, um, is phenomenal. And I think that's also helped kind of the layperson, the everyday person, get access to information that maybe we didn't understand before or even couldn't even know where to find.
It does get overwhelming as well. There's so much information. Coming from the coach inside of you, how do you navigate that part of it? I mean, as a coach, what would you tell somebody to, okay, Yeah, you can look at the AI, you can look at all this and get this information, but how do you put it into context that it is specifically about you and you're getting the right information?
Yeah, so I think one of the best things you can do if it's available to you is finding a provider that listens to you, a medical professional, a clinician, whatever, that listens to you. And so you can bring these things to them, educate yourself, yes, but self-diagnosis is not always the best answer either, right? So finding somebody that you can kind of communicate with, that listens to you. And then again, if you have the resources available, do things like blood panels, do things, other kinds of testing to kind of figure out, all right, this is what I've learned. Does this really even apply to me or doesn't it apply to me? And I know that that is not always accessible to everybody, but I think that's a good way to start, is having those conversations with a medical professional that you trust.
I agree. Looking at it from, okay, the hormonal side, what don't people understand or what don't they know? I mean, obviously I don't get it. But it's more complicated than people kind of give it credit for, right?
Oh, 100%. So one of the things when I started writing this book, I focused on what I thought were what are called the sex hormones, right? Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And I had no idea until I started researching. They're not just reproductive hormones. They affect everything in the body, from bone health to cognition to vascular health. Um, Obviously, fertility and reproductive is in there, but like muscle building and gut function and our microbiome. So when you are taking medicines or you're doing things that kind of impact the system, there's a cascade of effects. It's not just I take X and it only affects Y. It's like I take X and then there's all these other things that it could potentially impact, especially if our lifestyle um, uh, is not in line with being healthy and in balance, right? Where we may be almost making things worse. And again, going back to symptom management, specifically with birth control, is a lot of people think that it regulates their menstrual cycle. It doesn't. It doesn't balance anything. In fact, what it's doing is it's instead of your natural hormones, your natural progesterone and estrogen, it's using synthetic versions of those hormones. And of course, the dosing and type of birth control can change things. But a lot of people don't even know that they're putting synthetic hormones in their body, right? And these synthetic hormones do not interact the same way that our natural endogenous hormones do. And so, again, all these amazing benefits we get from estrogen, progesterone, testosterone don't apply the same way with those synthetic hormones.
Well, like you said, it's a cascading, almost waterfall. And we're saying that, how about the mental health side of it? How does birth control affect all that? Because you're not getting the natural, like you said, it's all synthetic. So how does it
Sure.
affect the cognitive aspect?
Yeah, so there are definitely studies out there, and especially teens and young women, um, specifically the pill. There's been some other types of combined birth control. There's been studies that have shown mood disorders, depression, um, and even more serious mental health complications can arise from the use of birth control, and it has a lot to do with you're not producing meaningful estrogen and progesterone, because what you're doing effectively, especially if you're taking synthetic estrogen, is you're suppressing ovulation. And a lot of women think of their menstrual cycle as one thing. I bleed and that's it. But your menstrual cycle is actually a four-phase cycle. It's literally a cycle. And each cycle is important in being able to promote maximal or optimal estrogen and progesterone for you, depending on where you are in your cycle. And it's kind of an amazing process, and we don't learn about it. It's literally your brain and your ovaries communicating with each other constantly. And it's really cool. But in school, it's just kind of framed as here's what you need to do to hide your menstrual cycle because it's an inconvenience, and pregnancy prevention, and that's really all it gets framed at. But if women understood, and even men understood, girl dads, if they can understand how powerful your menstrual cycle is, it's really a vital sign. It's, they call it the fifth vital sign. It's an indicator of health. So when you shut that down, you're losing that window into your health, and you're also potentially missing out on all the amazing benefits of those endogenous natural hormones.
Do you think it does affect you to the extent of maybe even depression? I mean, it from the mental side, does it really go down that road?
It can, and like I said, there's definitely research that reflects that, that there have been links to depression and mood disorders uh, using certain hormonal birth control methods.
Now, did you start being interested in this because of personal beliefs or personal reasons? Were you starting to have issues yourself?
Yeah, this it's kind of funny. I got on birth control at 17, diagnosed with endometriosis, and that is like kind of a full body inflammatory disease. And never didn't think twice about it. Got on birth control, never thought about it. And then with my coaching career and working with women and men, but specifically with women, we were doing everything right on the nutrition, on the lifestyle, but they were still having issues related to their cycle, related to other things like those mood disorders. And kept finding myself running into the same patterns. And then reflecting on my own journey, I started looking at those patterns at myself. And so eventually I was like, let me just look into this. Let me see what's actually going on. And at first I was very like, no, 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 I'm going to stay on birth control. And it took me 4 years of research before I decided to get off of it. It was a very I took it very seriously, right? And so that's why I'm so empathetic to women that are like, I hear what you're saying, but it's done so much for me in these areas, sexual independence, and allowed me to time my career and becoming a mom or not becoming a mom. So I completely understand, and I relate to that. But I also think, man, knowing what I know now, would I have made the same decision at 17? Who knows? 17-year-olds, you think you know everything, but maybe not. Or maybe I wouldn't have stayed on it as long as I had. So yeah, it was my personal journey along with having those one-on-one with my clients that made me go, "Oh, I need to do some more research. I need to educate myself."
So what was the biggest thing you saw from clients? Was it the stress or just everything?
Honestly, cycle health, right? Going back to irregular cycles, painful cycles, heavy cycles, not understanding, especially because I've worked with both like higher level athletes and also just, kind of everyday folks. F- and also just not understanding the symptoms they were experiencing. Like, oh, every couple weeks I have gut issues, but they weren't tracking those gut issues to where they were in their cycle. And again, I kind of keep harping on that, but there's so much women can learn about our menstrual cycle, the symptoms we experience, and what that reflects. So if I'm always having gut health issues at a certain time in my cycle, maybe I can look at alternatives to my nutrition or my stress management, or, why am I always so tired during this phase? Maybe I look at my sleep hygiene, right? There are other things that we can consider. But yeah, a lot of it just wasn't putting two and two together. It was just like, I'm a terrible sleeper. Well, maybe, but let's look at where the patterns are.
Well, like you said, it's not natural either. W If we look at people overall right now, healthy lifestyle, we have obviously exercise, fitness, we have nutrition, we have birth control as far as for women and what we believe is normal. But it's the overall lifestyle that actually suffers when you just take one of those links out, isn't it? Or
Oh, yeah.
you know what I mean? Or that breaks because it's not natural or it doesn't align with everything else. So,
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons I write about lifestyle and why it's so important in the book. It's not just having the education about your hormones, it's what do we do with it? Like, cool, Tiara, you told me all about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. You told me about birth control, but what now? What do I do? What do I have in my power, right, that I can improve upon? And yeah, I consider it kind of a pyramid where sleep for me is the foundation. Because if you're not sleeping, the idea that you're going to emotionally regulate when you're highly stressed, the idea that you're going to pick good, nutritious food when your brain is just craving like carbs and fats, and the idea that you're going to be motivated to go out and exercise, we have to sleep. That's where restoration happens. That's where emotional regulation happens. Then stress management, because again, those things lead to making better decisions with nutrition and movement. Then nutrition, because input's super important, and then movement. And it's not that I think anything is like less important. I just think those are the foundational kind of steps you need to take if you want to address issues that you have.
Do you find with your clients that there's one thing that is really affecting all of them, that's our society in general is kind of we're screwing up?
That's an interesting question. So I was doing one-on-one. I no longer do one-on-one. I don't have the bandwidth. I still do group coaching. I do CrossFit coaching, which is really fun, and that allows me to have conversations with people every day, but not have the time constraint of the one-on-ones. But I would say we're always in a hurry, and we never feel like we have enough time to take care of ourselves. And obviously I'm biasing this towards an adult population. Again, people more closer to my age, we have a lot of, we're kind of, what is that called? The sandwich generation, where you've got older parents, or that you may potentially be a caretaker of, and you may have younger children, and you have a job, and you have your own responsibilities, your own health. And so I find that the struggle is managing it all, right? Mentally, emotionally, and then making sure you prioritize yourself amongst all that.
Slowing down.
Slowing down, and that can be really hard because again, if you are someone that's taking care of your elderly parents and you have children, right, and you have a full-time job, like where do you fit yourself into that? But I would tell folks that, you have to consider yourself as part of the priority. What is that they tell you on an airplane? You have to put your mask on before you put, you know, you can't save everybody else if you're sinking. And so, yeah, that's what I would tell folks. If you have the chance to slow down, reflect, and pick one thing to take care of today, I'm going to make sure I go for a 20-minute walk for myself. I'm going to slow down, no phone, 20-minute walk. Man, today I'm going to sleep an extra 30 minutes. Right? And it may sound silly to some people, like, oh, that's not going to make a big difference. But that's a win for yourself. And it sets you up to have more wins down the road. So,
Well, don't you think that's kind of how we've failed? Because we wanna jump straight into fitness and health and all this all at once.
mm,
You know what I mean?
sure.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that deals with the hormone aspect and all that. We're just gonna jump straight in, and then what happens?
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, and I understand that motivation, right? You feel like you've been on a bad path or a bad track and you're like, today's the day. It's January 1st. I had to do a total life overhaul. But
Uh,
something that I have found, I've been doing this, working with folks since, 2014, 2015. And something that I have found is those small changes that are consistent are always going to be more sustainable than you doing a total fitness. And, if you go from never working out to trying to work out 5 times a week, and you're going to go from, maybe eating an unhealthy diet to being a salad addict. Maybe there's a person out there that can do that, but I think for most of us, let's start with 1 time a week. Let's do it, and let's be consistent for 6 weeks, and then let's do twice a week, and then, or let's start with just adding vegetables at dinner, and let's do that for a few weeks. And there's no rush, right? The goal is to set yourself up for success in the long term.
It's the lifestyle. It
It's
is
the
an
life it
actual
really is.
lifestyle.
And nobody I should say nobody. It's tough because I understand the temptation of that quick sell, right? Take this vitamin, take this medication, do this peptide, and everything will be better. And certainly things like peptides and red light therapy and sauna and cold plunge can be useful. I don't want to dismiss that stuff. But if you're not sleeping, you're drinking alcohol every day, you're eating ultra processed food every day, those are band-aids over a big open wound. And ultimately, you would save yourself some money and see much better results just focusing on the easy stuff. And nobody wants to hear that. I know it's boring, but it's so true.
I I'm recovering from cancer. I'm recovering from surgery over the summer, and I keep telling this story. I worked out most of the time, but the side effects of the chemo and all that, bone marrow transplant, I ended up gaining a significant amount of weight. Anyway, I finally figured out what was happening and got back down to where I needed to be. But I was coming off the surgery and I was on weight restrictions. And the day I came off weight restrictions, I'm like, I'm going to go do a pull up. Oh my God. I think I about ripped everything open. I mean,
Yeah, you can't just jump in feet first.
no. And
Yeah.
somebody that knows that I even did it is my point. It's you gotta take it slow. I mean, I was until that moment because I just, oh, hey, I got it, you know. But we still, it doesn't matter where you're at with your journey. You still take it one step at a time. You still take it slow.
Yeah, totally. And if you will see results if you are consistent with your progress. And again, you can't skip the line. Your biology will fight against you when you
That's
try.
true.
Or there'll be other effects that are probably not so pleasant.
So, for the young girls out there, birth control, health and wellness, fitness, all of it, where do you start? We just talk about small steps, but where do you really start?
Yeah. So if you're, a young woman or even a teenage girl and you're like, man, I'm a little bit confused. I'm not sure where to start with, I recommend finding a mentor, another woman that reflects uh, maybe the lifestyle or the goals that you want to strive for, if you can, if that's available to you. Again, I know social media can be precarious with that. I would say anybody that's not promoting extremes or promoting products only would be that you admire would be maybe a good way to go. Obviously, I have my book, which I think is a great resource, but there are a lot of great women out there that are really trying to educate and make women feel empowered and young girls. But I do understand it can be tough and the information can be confusing. Um, and not everybody has the time to do their own research, to comb through PubMed articles, right? I think I have 20 pages, just like articles of research I did. But yeah, I would say things to look out for, right, are going to be anybody that's extreme. You must do this. In 30 days, you can lose that. In 30, that's just not realistic. And if you can do it, it's probably causing more harm than good. It's easy to lose weight. It's really hard to keep it off, right? If weight loss is something you're interested in, but I was just using that as an example. But yeah, I think finding good mentors is so important for men and women, for young men, especially right now in this kind of day and age. Finding really strong men that promote mm, good ethics and again, not those short term results, not that flashy stuff.
So it doesn't matter what age you are, it really is the same lesson, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think having people that you can look up to, that you admire, that can help you kind of guide your path. I mean, I feel like that would have been huge for me if I had had that. Luckily I had the military to kind of set me straight. Um, but yeah,
It's just having that conversation,
it
you
is.
know?
Yeah, and having someone to talk to. And again, I remember being that age, and you really do think you know everything. Um, yeah, and you're very resolute in your ideas, but there's always room to grow.
I agree. What do people need to know about your book? What is the best thing they're gonna get out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so yeah, what I would like people to know about the book is that it is not anti-medicine, it is not anti-birth control. It is pro-informed choice. And I really want you and me, all of us, to have the same kind of playing field. And it allows you to have the language that you need to then talk to your provider. If you have questions, at the end of every chapter, I have questions to ask your doctor. I have self reflection questions. So I want you to be able to sit and think, digest the material. And then if you feel like something applies to you, be able to communicate that in a way that makes sense. Um, yeah, that's what I want people to know about the book. It's really the thing that I wish I had had. And I honestly think this is education we should be having in school. If I had like a really crazy long-term goal would be to have stuff like this in regular curriculum. Because again, men and women should know how our bodies work. But especially before we get prescribed a medication that changes it potentially.
I agree. And don't be in a hurry and ask the right questions. I think that's what scares people is actually not asking the right question or just not knowing what the question should
Not
be.
even knowing. I think that's it. I think not you don't know what you don't know. And that's tough. I didn't know what I didn't know for a long time. I'm still learning things. I'm working on my second book, which is about GLP-1s. And yeah, I'm learning a lot of things that I didn't know. Uh, so don't be afraid to ask questions.
A lot of the reason I started this was because I didn't feel like people were asking questions, you
Yeah,
know?
it's tough.
So
It's tough. I mean, we could spend another like 30 minutes talking about why that is,
right.
with the medical system. But there are really good doctors out there. There are good people that are trying to make a change. Um, and I think it's an exciting time in health and wellness because this kind of education is not just limited to, PhD holders. So
It's lessons from what people have been through. It's their story. I think that's where we really get it, and you, me, we all have the story. We just need to talk about it. Tierra Duncan, it was an absolute pleasure. Birth Control Illusions. Where can you get it? On Amazon?
yeah, I'll show you guys a little. Is here.
Nice.
So it's available on all platforms that you can buy books. I have Audible version, Kindle, paperback, hardback. Try to make it as accessible as possible to really spread the word. I have a YouTube and Instagram. They're both Tierra Duncan author, and on those platforms, I talk about all things hormones and birth control and lifestyle. A lot of just kind of information. And then sometimes I talk about book stuff too.
Perfect. And we're gonna link the blog to all your information so they can get it easily. And Tierra, again, absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate our conversation.
Of course. All right, everybody. As you know, find the attitude, keep the attitude, go out living. Till next time. Bye.